There's a special kind of loneliness that comes when your own children think you've lost your mind. For 72-year-old Nolan Kessler, that loneliness became his constant companion the day he spent his last dollar on a falling-down farmhouse. His kids called him crazy and stopped visiting. Neighbors whispered behind his back. But Nolan kept working, hammering boards, patching walls, rebuilding the home where his late wife once filled the kitchen with warmth and cinnamon rolls. He wasn't just fixing up an old house. He was building something his family didn't understand yet. Then strangers started showing up. People with secrets, people who needed what he'd created. What was Nolan really building out there all alone? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nolan Kessler woke at 5:30, same as he had for 47 years. The habit outlasted the factory shifts, outlasted the alarm clock he no longer needed, outlasted even the warm body that used to stir beside him when he rose. Now there was just the cold and the silence, and the first grey light creeping through gaps in the plastic sheeting he'd stapled over the broken windows. He lay still for a moment, his breath visible in the unheated room, and listened to the old house settle around him. Creaks and groans, the whisper of wind through cracks he hadn't yet sealed, the distant complaint of a loose shutter banging against the north wall. These were the sounds of his childhood, unchanged across 7 decades. His father used to say the house talked to those who knew how to listen. Nolan pushed himself upright on the narrow cot, his joints protesting the cold. 72 years old, but his hands were still steady, his back still strong enough for the work ahead. 35 years as a machinist had left him with that. Precision, patience, and a body that understood the value of proper form and regular maintenance. The room he slept in had been his parents' bedroom once. He'd managed to patch the roof directly above it, seal the window, get the old radiator working again. It was the only truly warm space in the house, barely 10 feet square, but it was enough. A cot, a Coleman stove for coffee, a camping lantern, a stack of clothes in a plastic bin. Everything else he owned was still in storage or sold to fund this project. His last dollar. That's what Claire had said when she'd visited. "You spent your last dollar on this wreck, Dad. Your last dollar." Like he didn't know the state of his own bank account. Like he hadn't calculated every penny with the same precision he'd once measured machine tolerances to thousandths of an inch. He made instant coffee on the camp stove, cupping the warm mug in both hands while he looked out through the plastic sheeting at the dawn. The farmhouse sat on 12 acres of rolling Pennsylvania countryside, far enough from town that neighbors were a concept more than a reality. The nearest house was half a mile down the gravel road. Beyond that, just fields and woods and the kind of quiet that people who'd never left the city couldn't quite understand. The land had been in his family for 3 generations before his parents died, and his sister sold it to a developer who never developed anything. 23 years the house had sat empty. 23 years of weather and neglect and slow decay. When Nolan had seen it listed for back taxes, something in his chest had pulled tight. Margaret had been gone 3 years by then. The kids had scattered to their own lives, and Nolan had been rattling around in the tidy suburban ranch house they'd raised their family in, feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. So he'd bought it, used every cent of his retirement savings, his pension lump sum, everything. Signed the papers on his 72nd birthday, drove out here with a truck full of tools and a heart full of something he couldn't quite name. Not nostalgia exactly, something bigger, something that felt like the first clear breath he'd taken since Margaret's funeral. He finished his coffee and dressed in work clothes, flannel shirt, canvas work pants, the steel-toed boots he'd worn in the shop. Then he picked up his father's old leather tool belt from where it hung on a nail by the door. He'd found it in the basement, mildewed and cracked, and spent a week cleaning and conditioning the leather back to suppleness. His father's initials were still visible on the brass buckle, R.K. Robert Kessler. A man who'd built this house with his own hands in 1947, who'd raised 2 children here, who'd taught Nolan that honest work was its own kind of prayer. The morning light was stronger now. Nolan walked through the shell of the house, assessing the day's work. The structure was sound. His father had built well, but everything else needed attention. Walls stripped to studs in most rooms, floorboards torn up where rot had taken hold, ceilings exposing ancient knob and tube wiring that would all need to be replaced. The kitchen was completely gutted, just a concrete slab and rough plumbing stubs jutting from the walls. But he'd made progress. 3 months of work, and he'd rebuilt the back porch, replaced the worst of the roof, started framing in the downstairs bathroom. Slow work for one man his age, but steady. He knew how to pace himself, how to break big jobs into manageable pieces, how to rest when his body demanded it without giving up. In the corner of what would be the kitchen again someday, covered with a tarp, sat a wooden box about the size of a bread loaf. He'd found it 2 weeks ago, in the rubble of what had been his mother's pantry. Margaret's recipe box. He recognized it immediately, even through the dust and water stains, the small painted roses on the lid, her careful handwriting on the cards inside. She'd brought that box to this house as a bride 50 years ago. They'd lived here for the first 7 years of their marriage while Nolan worked at the factory and saved for their own place. Claire had been born in the upstairs bedroom, Marcus too. Those had been good years, crowded and joyful, the little house always smelling of something baking, always full of laughter and the controlled chaos of young children. He'd opened the box once since finding it, just to be sure. The cards were still there, protected by their wooden container. Her recipe for cinnamon rolls, the one she made every Sunday morning, her apple pie, her pot roast, her Christmas cookies, each card in her neat script, notes in the margins about substitutions and tips, little stars next to family favorites. Nolan had closed the box carefully and covered it again. He wasn't ready yet. The kitchen wasn't ready yet. He turned to the work at hand. Today he was framing the new bathroom, running water lines, preparing for the electrical that would come later. He'd pulled the permits himself, studied code books from the library, called in favors from old union brothers who still knew the trades. Everything by the book. Everything right. His phone rang at 9:30. He almost didn't answer. There were only 3 numbers that ever called him, and he wasn't ready for any of those conversations. But habit won out. "Mr. Kessler, it's Earl, down at Miller's Hardware." Earl Hansen. Nolan had been buying supplies from his store for 3 months now, always paying cash, always polite but distant. Earl was polite back in that way small-town people are with strangers, even strangers who'd grown up here. "Morning, Earl. Got your order in, the PVC pipe and the 2x6s. You want me to run it out there, or you picking up?" "I'll come get it. Give me an hour." Silence on the line. Then, "Nolan, I don't mean to pry into your business." "Then don't." Not harsh, just firm. "Right. Hour, then." Earl hung up. Nolan knew what Earl wanted to say. Same thing everyone wanted to say. "You're too old for this. It's too much for one man. Your kids are worried." The whole town was talking, he was sure. Old Nolan Kessler lost his wife and lost his mind, out there trying to rebuild a house that should have been torn down decades ago. Let them talk. He drove into town in his old pickup, windows down despite the November chill. The roads were familiar even after all these years away. Past the Hendersons' farm, past the church where he and Margaret had married, past the elementary school that was now a community center. Some things had changed, but the bones of the place, the fundamental shape of it, that was the same. Miller's Hardware was on Main Street, tucked between the post office and a diner that had changed names 3 times but still smelled like coffee and bacon grease. Earl had everything ready, stacked by the loading door. "Appreciate it," Nolan said, pulling out his wallet. Earl was 65, barrel-chested, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life doing outdoor work before inheriting his father's store. He counted out Nolan's cash carefully, made change, then didn't move to help load. "Your daughter called here last week," Earl said. "Asked if I knew how you were doing. If I thought you were—" He stopped. "If I was what? Senile? Dangerous to myself?" Earl had the grace to look uncomfortable. "She's worried. She's angry." Nolan picked up the first bundle of 2x6s. "There's a difference." "Maybe so." Earl watched him load the truck, not offering help, understanding somehow that Nolan needed to do this himself. But she called. That means something. It means she wants to be proven right. Nolan secured the load with practiced efficiency. "Thanks for the supplies, Earl." He drove back out to the farmhouse with his windows still down and the radio off, just the sound of wind and tires on asphalt. He thought about Claire's call to the hardware store, Marcus's email from 2 weeks ago that he hadn't answered, Beth's voicemail that he'd deleted after 5 seconds, his children, his 3 living children. The thought always came with that qualifier now. 3 living children. As if by saying it he could keep the 4th one present somehow, the one they never talked about, the one who'd lived only 3 days in an incubator before her heart gave out. Emily. They'd named her Emily, and Margaret had held her until the end, and then they'd buried her in a plot so small it still made Nolan's throat close up 42 years later. The other kids had been too young to remember. Claire was 7, Marcus 5, Beth barely 2. They'd been told their baby sister had gone to heaven, and children that age accept such things without the questions that would come later. The family had moved on because that's what you did in 1983. You grieved privately and got back to work and tried to fill the hole with normal life. But the hole never filled, not completely, and Margaret had understood that. Near the end, when the cancer had stripped away everything but essential truth, she'd held his hand and said, "Promise me you'll do something good with the sadness. Promise me it won't be wasted." He'd promised. Back at the house, Nolan unloaded the truck and spent the afternoon running water lines. The work was methodical, satisfying. Measure, cut, fit, test. No room for emotion in the precision of it. Just his hands and the materials and the slow transformation of chaos into order. At 4 o'clock his phone rang again. Claire this time. He stared at the screen for 3 rings. Then 4, then let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification chimed. He didn't listen to it. Instead, he walked through the house in the fading light, seeing not what was, but what would be. Kitchen there, big enough for a table that could seat 8. Living room with space for comfortable furniture. Shelves for books. A fireplace that worked. 4 bedrooms upstairs. His parents' room, his old room, his sister's room, and the small one at the end of the hall that had been a sewing room. Downstairs a bathroom with a walk-in shower and grab bars. Another bathroom upstairs. Washer and dryer in the back hallway. Everything accessible, everything safe, everything built to last. He stood in the center of the gutted kitchen and let himself finally see it. Not as it was, but as it would be. Lights on. Warmth in every room. Voices, life, purpose. A place where people could come when they had nowhere else to go. That night, Nolan heated a can of soup on the camp stove and ate it sitting on the back porch, wrapped in an old wool blanket. The stars were sharp and cold above the empty fields. Somewhere in the woods an owl called, low and mournful. His father used to sit here on summer evenings, smoking his pipe, talking about the day's work or the next season's plans or nothing at all. His mother would bring out lemonade and sit beside him, and the silence between them was the comfortable kind, built on 40 years of shared life. Nolan missed that. Missed Margaret's particular presence, the way she could fill a silence without saying a word. Missed the sound of his children's voices when they still called just to talk. Missed the feeling of being connected to something larger than his own solitary heartbeat. But this house, when it was finished, maybe it could be that connection. Maybe it could be the thing that Margaret had asked him to build from the sadness. A place where the word family meant more than blood and disappointment. A place where people who'd been left behind could find their way home. He finished his soup and rinsed the pot at the outdoor spigot. Then he went inside to his small room and lay down on the cot, still wearing his work clothes because it was easier than undressing in the cold. Before he turned off the lantern, he opened the notebook he kept by his bed, his work journal. In it, he recorded every decision, every repair, every measurement and material cost. But also the things that couldn't be measured, the why behind the what. Tonight he wrote, Day 87, bathroom framing complete. Claire called again, didn't answer. Earl asked questions. Everyone thinks they know what I'm doing here. But they're looking at the house. They need to look at what the house is for. Margaret understood. I promised her. This isn't madness. This is the sanest thing I've ever done. He closed the notebook, turned off the lantern, and lay in the darkness listening to the house settle around him. Outside, the loose shutter banged once, twice, then went still. Tomorrow he'd fix that shutter. Tomorrow he'd keep building. Claire's car pulled into the driveway on a Thursday afternoon in late November. Nolan was on the roof patching shingles when he heard the engine, looked down, and felt his stomach drop. She'd come alone this time. No husband to referee, no advance warning. Just her, silver sedan kicking up gravel dust and stopping 20 feet from his truck. He climbed down slowly, giving himself time to prepare. Claire stepped out wearing her lawyer clothes, dark slacks, pressed blouse, a wool coat that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. She was 45 now, looked older when she frowned, which was most of the time these days. She had Margaret's eyes and Nolan's stubbornness, a combination that had served her well in courtrooms and poorly in family dinners. Dad. Not a greeting, more like an opening statement. Claire. Wasn't expecting you. Clearly. She looked at the house, and he saw her taking inventory. The plastic-covered windows, the exposed framing in the addition he was building, the generator running power to his tools because the electrical wasn't connected yet. Her expression said everything her mouth hadn't. Come inside, Nolan said. I'll make coffee. How? On that camping stove? But she followed him anyway, picking her way carefully across the plywood subfloor he'd laid down in the mudroom. The one finished room looked smaller with her in it. She stood near the door, arms crossed, while he heated water for instant coffee. 2 mugs, both chipped, from the box of supplies he kept. She didn't sit. The heat's working, he said. It's warm enough. Dad, this is... She stopped, reset. He recognized the technique. She did it with hostile witnesses. How long were you planning to live like this? As long as it takes. As long as what takes? You can't rebuild this house by yourself. You're 72 years old. I'm aware. Are you? She set her untouched coffee on the windowsill. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've lost perspective. You sold everything. You're living in one room without proper utilities. You're not answering your phone. Earl Hansen called me, Dad. The man who runs the hardware store called me because he's worried about you. Earl needs to mind his business. Your business is everyone's business when you're acting like this. Her voice rose, then she caught herself again. I've talked to Marcus and Beth. We're all on the same page. What page is that? She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. White, business size, his name typed on the front. She held it out, but he didn't take it. What is it? A letter. From all 3 of us. We think you need to see someone. A doctor. Get evaluated. The word hung in the cold air between them. Evaluated. like he was a machine with faulty components, something that needed diagnostics before it could be trusted again. I don't need a doctor. Dad, please just read it. She set the envelope on the makeshift table he'd built from sawhorses and plywood. We're worried about you. This obsession, it's not an obsession. With this house, it's not healthy. Mom's been gone 3 years. I understand you're grieving, but this isn't the answer. You don't understand anything about it. Then explain it to me. She spread her hands. Make me understand why you'd throw away your entire retirement, your security, your safety, for a house that should be condemned. Make me understand why you won't answer when your children call, why you're out here alone doing work that's dangerous for someone your age. Nolan looked at his daughter and saw the little girl who used to help him in the garage, handing him tools, asking 1,000 questions about how things worked. Somewhere between then and now, she'd learned to stop asking and start telling. I tried to explain, he said quietly. You wouldn't listen. That's not fair. Isn't it? Every time I've tried to talk about what I'm doing here, what it's for, you cut me off. You and Marcus and Beth. All of you so sure you know what's best for me. Because we love you. No, he shook his head. Because you're scared. And I understand that, but your fear doesn't get to dictate my choices. Claire's jaw tightened. She picked up the envelope again and held it out insistently. This time, Nolan took it. Read it, she said. Really read it. We've outlined some options. Good facilities, close to family. Places where you'd be safe and looked after. Your pension would cover it. You could sell this place, recover some of your savings. I'm not selling, Dad, and I'm not going into a facility. He set the envelope down without opening it. I'm rebuilding this house. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to keep doing. Even if it cost you your family. The question landed like a punch. Claire's eyes were bright, angry, or tearful, or both. She looked like Margaret in that moment, back when the kids were teenagers and arguments happened over curfews and car privileges and all the small rebellions of growing up. Is that what you're saying? Nolan asked. That my choices are abandon this or lose you? I'm saying we can't watch you destroy yourself. If you won't accept help, if you won't even consider that you might not be thinking clearly. She stopped, started again. We've talked to a lawyer about options. Options. If you can't make sound decisions for yourself, the courts can appoint someone to make them for you. Power of attorney. Guardianship. She wasn't saying the words, but they were there in the space between them. His children thought he'd lost his mind, and they were preparing to have him declared incompetent. Get out, Nolan said. Dad, get out of my house. Claire stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed her purse. At the door, she turned back. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. The letter has all our numbers. We just want you safe. I am safe. What I'm not is what you want me to be. She left without another word. Nolan listened to her car start, the crunch of gravel as she backed out and drove away. Then he picked up the envelope and sat down on his cot. The letter was 3 pages. Printed on Claire's law, firm letterhead. Professional, formal, devastating. It laid out their concerns, his sudden decision to buy the property, his isolation, his refusal to communicate, his unsafe living conditions. It mentioned cognitive decline, depression, grief-induced delusion. It strongly recommended evaluation by a geriatric psychiatrist. It provided names of memory care facilities with openings. It ended with a paragraph about how much they loved him and how they only wanted what was best. At the bottom, all 3 signatures. Claire's neat and angular, Marcus's barely legible scrawl, Beth's with a little heart over the I in her name, like she still signed birthday cards. Nolan read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. He sat there for a long time as the afternoon faded and the generator rumbled outside and the house creaked around him. They thought he'd lost his mind. Maybe from the outside it looked that way. Old man, dead wife, crumbling house, every cent gone. From the outside it probably looked like grief had broken something essential in him. From the inside, though, from where he sat with his father's tool belt and his mother's house and Margaret's recipe box waiting in the kitchen, from here it looked like the first sane thing he'd done since the day they'd lowered his wife into the ground. He picked up his phone, dialed Marcus first. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. "Marcus, it's your father. Call me back. We need to talk." Then Beth's number. Same result. "Beth, honey, it's Dad. Please call me." Neither one returned his calls. That night he lay on his cot in the darkness and thought about Emily. The daughter his living children didn't remember. The hole in the family that had never been acknowledged, never been filled. Margaret had carried that grief like a stone in her chest for 42 years, and Nolan had carried it with her. They'd never talked about it much, even between themselves. Just got up every morning and loved the children they had, and tried not to think about the one they'd lost. But at the end, when there was no more time for pretending, Margaret had asked him to promise, to do something good with the sadness, to not let Emily's brief life be for nothing. This house was that promise. And his children, who'd never known their sister, who'd never understood the shape of their parents' grief, thought it was madness. Maybe it was. Maybe there was no difference between mission and delusion when you were 72 and alone and hammering nails into boards at dawn. But Nolan didn't believe that. He'd made a promise to his wife. He'd hold a plan since before she died, and he'd see it through, even if it meant losing everything else. Outside, the wind picked up. The loose shutter he still hadn't fixed banged against the house like someone knocking to be let in. Tomorrow, Nolan thought. Tomorrow I'll fix that shutter. Tomorrow I'll keep building. And if his children never spoke to him again, at least he'd have kept his word. 2 weeks passed without a word from any of them. Nolan checked his phone every morning out of habit, but the calls never came. No texts, no emails, just silence spreading out like frost across everything he'd once taken for granted. He adapted, made his routine tighter, more efficient. Up at 5:30, work until dark, simple dinner, notes in his journal before sleep. The work became everything. Framing walls, running conduit for electrical, replacing rotted sills in the basement. Each task was a conversation with the house, his hands speaking the language his father had taught him 50 years ago. The journal sat by his cot, filling up with more than just measurements and materials. He wrote about the plan, the real plan that Claire had cut him off from explaining. Every detail documented, every decision justified. Not for them anymore, maybe. For himself, for the record. Day 101. Finished bathroom framing. Ordered fixtures from Earl. He stopped asking questions, just takes my orders. Good. Claire and Marcus called each other's numbers, but not mine. Beth sent an email. Dad, we love you. Please reconsider. Didn't respond. What's the point? They've already decided what I am. Broken, declining, dangerous to myself. They want me safe in a room somewhere, playing checkers, waiting to die. They don't understand I've already been in that room. It was the suburban ranch after Margaret died. This is me climbing out. He worked methodically through December. The house took shape around him like something being carved from stone, revealing its true form one careful cut at a time. He got the downstairs bathroom functional, toilet, sink, shower with a seat. Small victory, but it meant he didn't have to use the outhouse anymore or heat water on the camp stove for washing. Progress measured in warm water and dignity. On a gray morning 2 days before Christmas, a car pulled into the driveway. Not Claire's sedan, a compact import, dusty, with a cracked windshield. Nolan was replacing boards on the front porch and didn't look up until the engine died and a young woman got out. She was maybe 28, 30 at most. dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt that hung loose on her frame. Pretty once, probably, but there was a hardness around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard choices. And she was pregnant 6 or 7 months along, moving carefully as she approached the porch. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to bother you. My car, something's wrong with it. It's making a noise. I saw your house and thought maybe—" She stopped, seeming to realize how the place must look. Construction site, not a home. Old man with a hammer, no signs of hospitality or help. "Where are you headed?" Nolan asked. "West, Oregon, maybe. I have a cousin there. She said I could stay with her until—" She gestured at her stomach. "Until things are figured out." "Long drive?" "Yeah." She looked back at her car. "If you have a phone I could use, I can call a tow truck. I won't take up your time." Nolan set down his hammer. "Let me take a look first. Might be something simple." He followed her to the car, had her started up. The noise was obvious. Belt squeal, high-pitched and urgent. He had her pop the hood, checked the serpentine belt. Cracked, fraying, about 2 hours from complete failure. "When's the last time you had this serviced?" he asked. "I don't know. A while." She twisted her hands together. "How bad is it?" "Belt needs replacing. I can do it, but I'd need to go into town for the part." "I can't afford. I mean, I have some money, but I'll cover it. Consider it a Christmas present." She blinked. "I can't let you do that. You can't stop me either, but it'll take a couple hours round trip. You're welcome to wait inside where it's warm." He could see her calculating, weighing risk against necessity. Strange man, isolated location, nowhere else to go. But the December air was cold and she was shivering in just the sweatshirt. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you. I'm Sarah." "Nolan." He got her settled in the finished room with a working radiator, made her instant coffee, and gave her the blanket from his cot. Then he drove into town, bought the belt and some groceries he didn't mention. Bread, lunch meat, fruit. The kind of things a pregnant woman traveling alone probably wasn't eating enough of. Earl rang up the belt without comment, but his eyes asked questions. "Got a stranded traveler," Nolan said. "Car trouble. Good of you to help. Just human decency." "Still," Earl bagged the belt. "World could use more of it." Back at the house, Sarah was sitting by the window, looking out at the empty fields. She stood when he came in, too quickly, like she was used to having to be ready to move. "Found the belt," he said. "Give me 30 minutes. The repair was straightforward. He'd changed 1,000 belts in his years, keeping his own vehicles running. While he worked, Sarah came outside and stood at a careful distance, watching. "You know a lot about cars," she said. "Machinist by trade. You learn to fix things. And houses too. This one I'm learning as I go. My father built it. Figured if he could do it, I could rebuild it. You live here alone?" He heard the question beneath the question. "My wife passed 3 years ago. Kids are grown. But they don't visit." Nolan focused on tensioning the belt. "We're going through a rough patch. I'm sorry. Not your problem." He started the engine, listened to it run clean and smooth. "That should do it." Sarah came closer. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Told you it was a Christmas present. I can't just—" "You can, and you will." He wiped his hands on a rag. "You've got a long drive ahead. Need to save your money for when you get where you're going." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Why are you rebuilding this house, out here all alone?" It was the same question Claire had asked. Earl, everyone. But Sarah asked it differently, not accusingly, just curious, maybe a little sad. "I made a promise to my wife," Nolan said. "This house is how I keep it." Must have been some promise. The important kind. Sarah nodded like she understood. I made a promise too, to myself, that my baby wouldn't grow up around what I grew up around. That's why I'm driving to Oregon. Running from something. Someone. Her father, She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. I'm leaving and he can't find me. Nolan heard the fear in her voice, recognized it from the domestic calls he'd heard about over the years at the Union Hall. Men who thought they owned the women in their lives. Men who got mean when they were told no. "You need anything for the road?" he asked. "I bought some supplies. I can't keep taking from you." "It's not taking if I'm offering." He went inside, came back with a grocery bag. Sarah looked inside and something in her face cracked a little. Not crying, but close. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know why you're being so kind to a stranger, but thank you. We're all strangers until we're not." She got in her car, started it up. The engine purred clean. Through the window, she said, "I hope your promise works out. I hope your kids realize what they're missing." Then she drove away, and Nolan watched until her taillights disappeared down the gravel road. He went back to work on the porch, but something had shifted. The house felt less empty, the silence less absolute. For a few hours, another person had stood on this land, had accepted his help, had seen him as something other than broken or declining. That night in his journal he wrote, "Day 115. Met Sarah today. Young woman, pregnant, running west. Fixed her car, gave her food. She asked why I'm doing this. I told her about the promise. She understood. First person who has. Claire and the others. They see the house and think I'm lost." Sarah saw the house and asked about the promise. Small difference. Everything. The next morning he found a note tucked under his truck's windshield wiper. Sarah's handwriting, small and neat. "Thank you for seeing me. For helping without asking all the questions. You're building something good here. I can tell. Merry Christmas." He folded the note carefully and put it in his journal. Then he went back to work, the house rising around him, the promise taking shape board by board. January came cold and clear. Nolan worked through the freeze, insulating walls, sealing drafts, getting the old furnace running in the basement. The kitchen was taking shape now. Cabinets salvaged from a demolition site Earl had told him about, refinished in his makeshift workshop. The counters were new, simple laminate that fit his budget. But the bones of the room, the layout, that was all his mother's design. He was rebuilding it from memory and love. One afternoon he stood at the kitchen sink he'd just installed, looking out the window at the frozen fields, and without thinking, he reached for the wooden box he'd uncovered weeks ago. Margaret's recipe box. The painted roses were faded but still visible. He opened it slowly. Inside, her handwriting. Each card a small piece of her voice preserved in blue ink. He pulled out the one for cinnamon rolls, her Sunday morning specialty. The ingredients list, the instructions, little notes in the margins, "Don't rush the rise," and "Extra butter on top while hot," and a small star at the bottom next to "Everyone's favorite." Nolan set the card on the counter and gathered ingredients. Flour, yeast, sugar, butter. He had everything. He followed her instructions exactly, measuring with the same precision he brought to carpentry, letting the dough rise in the warm kitchen while he worked on the electrical panel in the basement. When the rolls came out of the oven 2 hours later, the smell filled the entire house. Cinnamon and butter and yeast, the exact fragrance of Sunday mornings when the kids were young, and Margaret would call them down to a kitchen full of warmth and sweetness. For a moment, Nolan stood in that smell and let it take him back. Claire at 7, already serious and responsible, helping set the table. Marcus at 5, stealing bites of dough. Beth barely walking, sticky-handed and giggling. And Emily, who never got to taste her mother's cinnamon rolls, who never got to sit at that table or steal that dough or make those memories. He took a roll from the pan, burned his fingers on it, ate it standing at the counter. It tasted right. It tasted like home and loss and love all mixed together. The memories kept coming. Margaret teaching Claire to knead bread, patient and encouraging even when young hands made a mess. Margaret singing while she cooked, old hymns she'd learned from her own mother. Margaret at this very counter, in this very kitchen, pregnant with Marcus and glowing with joy. They'd been so young then, so sure of themselves, so certain that life would unfold exactly as they planned. Then Emily had come and gone in 3 days, and nothing had been certain again. They never talked about it, not really. Not with each other, and certainly not with the kids. It was 1983, and you didn't burden children with adult grief. You smiled and got up each morning and made breakfast, and went to work and pretended that the hole in your heart was something you could learn to live around. But Margaret had carried it. Nolan had seen it sometimes in her face when she thought no one was looking. A sadness that never quite went away, a wondering about the daughter she'd held for such a short time. And at the end, when the cancer had made everything else fall away, she'd finally said it out loud. "I think about her every day," Margaret had whispered in the hospice room. "Emily, I never stopped thinking about her." "I know," Nolan had said. "We should have talked about it more. With each other. With Claire and Marcus and Beth. We should have let ourselves grieve properly. We were doing our best. Were we?" Her hand had been so light in his, barely there. Or were we just scared? He hadn't had an answer for that. But she'd asked him to promise, to do something good with the sadness, to make Emily's brief life mean something beyond the plot in the cemetery they visited twice a year. And in the weeks after Margaret died, while his children circled anxiously and suggested grief counseling and tried to manage his emotions like they were something broken that needed fixing, Nolan had started to understand what that promise meant. This house, not just rebuilt, but transformed. A place where people who'd been broken by life could find shelter, where family meant something more than blood and obligation, where the love that had nowhere to go after Emily died could finally find a purpose. He'd started making calls, county services, social workers, housing authorities, asking questions about emergency shelters and transitional housing and what it would take to create a place for people in crisis. The answers had been complicated but not impossible. Permits, inspections, certifications, insurance. A lot of paperwork and patience and proof that he knew what he was doing. He'd started that process before Margaret died, actually. She'd helped him research, encouraged him, blessed the plan. It was their joint dream in those final months, that the grief they'd carried for 42 years might become something that helped others. But after she passed, before he could explain the full scope of it, the kids had decided he was falling apart. And once they'd made that decision, they couldn't hear anything else. On a frozen afternoon in mid-January, Reverend Walsh from the church in town pulled up the driveway. Nolan was installing a handrail on the front steps and didn't stop working when the pastor got out. "Nolan?" Walsh called. "Got a minute?" "Working. I can see that." Walsh climbed the steps carefully, testing each one. "Your daughter asked me to check on you. Claire always did like recruiting allies. She's worried. Can you blame her?" Nolan set down his drill and looked at the pastor. Walsh was 60, fit, with kind eyes, and the practiced calm of someone who'd sat through a lot of deathbeds and family crises. "What did she tell you?" Nolan asked. "That you're living in difficult conditions, that you've stopped communicating, that she's concerned about your judgment." "My judgment is fine." "Then help me understand." Walsh gestured at the house. "Why this? Why now? Why alone?" So Nolan told him. Not everything, but enough. The plan for a shelter. The licensing process he'd started. Margaret's blessing and final request. The kids who'd stopped listening before he could explain. Walsh listened without interrupting. When Nolan finished, the pastor was quiet for a long moment. That's not what Claire thinks you're doing, he said finally. I know. Have you told her so in detail? I tried. She cut me off. Said I was rationalizing. Walsh nodded slowly. She thinks you're in denial about Margaret's death, that you're creating busy work to avoid grief. I'm not avoiding anything. I'm transforming it. I believe you, Walsh said. I can see it. The clarity in your eyes, the purpose in your work. You're not a man coming apart. You're a man building something. Tell Claire that. I will. But Nolan, Walsh put a hand on his shoulder. You have to meet them halfway. They're scared. They love you. They just can't see what you see. That's not my fault. Maybe not. But it's your reality. After Walsh left, Nolan went back to work, but the conversation sat heavy in his chest. He understood what the pastor was saying, that being right didn't matter if his children couldn't hear him, that sometimes you had to explain yourself in smaller words, simpler terms, even if it felt like talking down. But he was tired of explaining, tired of defending, tired of justifying his own choices to people who'd already decided he was broken. That night his phone buzzed with an email. From Marcus this time. Dad, Pastor Walsh called. He says you're doing okay, but we're still concerned. We love you, but we can't watch you do this to yourself. Please call. Nolan typed back. I'm doing okay, better than okay. I'm doing what I promised your mother I'd do. If you want to understand, you'll have to trust me, or at least stop assuming I'm falling apart. He hit send before he could second-guess it. No response came. That night in his journal, day 128. Kitchen functional now. Made Margaret's cinnamon rolls from her recipe. Tasted right, felt right. Walsh visited on Claire's behalf. He understands, but can't make them understand for me. Marcus emailed. Same concerns, different words. Told him to trust me. Doubt he will. They've all decided what this is. Nobody asking what it's for anymore. Just assuming broken man, broken mind, broken future. But I'm not broken. I'm finally putting the pieces together right. March brought mud and longer days. 3 months since Claire's visit. 4 since he'd spoken to any of his children beyond terse emails that went mostly unanswered. The silence had settled into something permanent, a fact rather than a wound. Nolan worked through it, measuring his progress in completed rooms rather than repaired relationships. The front porch was finished now. He'd rebuilt it board by board, following his father's original design, but adding modern safety features. Railings at the right height, non-slip surfaces, good lighting. And the swing. He'd found the old porch swing in the barn, weathered and splitting, and spent a week restoring it. Stripped the old paint, sanded the wood smooth, reinforced the joints, applied 3 coats of white paint, hung it, from new chains rated to hold twice the weight it would ever carry. It was the same swing his parents had sat on summer evenings, the same swing where he and Margaret had sat as newlyweds, talking about their future, where they'd rocked their babies to sleep, where they'd aged together slowly, year by year, until the swing was all that remained of those conversations. He sat on it now in the cool March afternoon, testing the chains, feeling it sway gently. Solid, safe, ready for someone to use it. That's when the car pulled in, the same compact import with the cracked windshield. Sarah's car. She got out slowly, much more pregnant than she'd been 3 months ago, 8 months now, easily. Maybe more. She looked exhausted and scared and relieved all at once. I'm sorry, she said as Nolan stood. I didn't know where else to go. He came down the steps. What happened? He found me. Jake, my ex. He found me in Oregon. Showed up at my cousin's place. There was a scene. The cops came. My cousin... Her voice broke. She said I had to leave, that she couldn't have that kind of drama in her life. So you drove back here. I've been driving for 2 days. I don't have anywhere else." She looked at the house, at him, at the porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. "I know it's too much to ask. I know I'm a stranger. But I remembered this place, and you were kind before, and I thought maybe—" "Come inside," Nolan said. He got her settled in the guest room he'd finished the week before. Real bed, clean sheets, working heat. The room had been his sister's once, with a window facing east to catch the morning sun. He'd painted it a soft yellow, hung curtains Margaret had made years ago that he'd found in a storage box. Sarah sat on the bed and started to cry. Not dramatic tears, just quiet exhaustion spilling over. "I'll make tea," Nolan said, and left her some privacy. In the kitchen, the nearly complete kitchen with functioning appliances and Margaret's recipe box on the counter, he heated water and thought about what he was doing, taking in a pregnant stranger, someone running from a dangerous ex, someone with no money, no family support, nowhere else to turn. He thought about his children's letter, their concerns about his judgment, their threats of legal intervention. Then he made the tea and brought it upstairs. Sarah had stopped crying and was looking out the window at the fields. "This is a beautiful room," she said. "You did all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had help with the electrical and plumbing." "Why?" She turned to face him. "Why are you doing all this work?" "To create space for people who need it. People like me, among others." She was quiet for a moment, holding the tea mug in both hands. "I can't pay you. Not asking you to. I can help with work around the house. I can cook, clean, whatever you need. I'm not helpless, even if I look like I'm about to pop." "When are you due?" 4 weeks, maybe less. I haven't exactly been keeping regular appointments." Nolan nodded. "There's a clinic in town. I'll take you tomorrow." "You don't have to—" "Yes," he said firmly. "I do. You and that baby need proper care." Earl's reaction the next day was predictable. Nolan had stopped by for supplies and mentioned he had a house guest now. "The same girl from December?" Earl asked. "Same one. And she's staying with you?" "She needs help." Earl set down the box of nails he was ringing up. "Nolan, I don't mean to tell you your business." "Then don't. But you realize how this looks? Old man, young pregnant woman living in your house? Your daughter's already worried about your judgment." "My judgment is fine. Sarah needed help. I had space. Simple as that." "Is it?" Earl lowered his voice. "Because people talk. And if your family gets wind of this, let them talk. Let my family hear about it. I'm doing the right thing and I don't need permission." But Earl's warning sat with him as he drove back to the farmhouse. His children already thought he was losing his grip on reality. What would they think when they heard he'd taken in a stranger? A young, pregnant, desperate stranger? They'd think it confirmed everything. That he was being taken advantage of. That his judgment was impaired. That they needed to intervene before he got hurt or hurt someone else. Sarah was in the kitchen when he got home, making sandwiches. Simple lunch, meat and cheese, but the smell of food being prepared by someone else filled the house with a warmth it hadn't had in months. "Hope you don't mind," she said. "I was hungry and figured you would be too." They ate at the kitchen table, the same table his mother had used, refinished and sturdy again. Sarah asked about the house, about his work, about how he'd learned to do all this. He found himself talking more than he had in months, explaining his father's building techniques, his own machinist training, the way different skills transferred across trades. "You're really good at this," Sarah said, "at building, at making things right." "Learned from my father. He believed in doing things proper." "Did he build this house for your mother?" "For our whole family. He wanted a place where his children and grandchildren would always be welcome. A place with deep roots." "That's beautiful." Sarah traced the wood grain of the table. "I never had that. My parents split when I was 6. got bounced around between them, neither one really wanting me full-time. Foster care for a while in high school. Then I met Jake and thought I'd finally found someone who'd give me that kind of stability. What happened? He hit me. Simple words, stated flatly. Not at first. At first he was charming, attentive, everything I wanted. Then after I got pregnant, the charm went away. Started with yelling, escalated from there. I left when he shoved me into a wall and I realized the baby wasn't safe. I'm sorry. Not your fault. She pushed her plate away. But I need you to understand something. Jake he's not going to just let this go. He thinks he owns me, thinks the baby is his property. When he finds out I'm here, and he will find out, there could be trouble. I can handle trouble. Can you? Because he's 34 and mean and doesn't care about consequences, and you're... She stopped. Old. I was going to say kind, and I don't want you to get hurt because you helped me. Nolan looked at this young woman, barely older than his own daughters had been when they'd left home, carrying a baby she was determined to protect. He thought about Emily again, about all the years he and Margaret had carried that grief without purpose. This house isn't just for you, he said. I mean, right now it is. But that's not the whole plan. I'm creating a shelter for people in crisis, people who need a safe place temporarily. The county's been working with me on licensing and all the legal requirements. Sarah stared at him. You're serious? Completely. That's why you're doing all this? Not just to rebuild your childhood home? The rebuilding is step one. The shelter is the mission. Does your family know? They stopped listening before I could explain. That's why they think you're crazy. Among other reasons. Sarah laughed, a surprised sound that seemed to startle her. You're not crazy. You're the most sane person I've met in years. Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Sarah helped where she could, folding laundry, organizing supplies, preparing simple meals. Nolan worked on the upstairs bedrooms, getting them ready for future residents. They didn't talk much, but the companionship was comfortable, each of them healing from different wounds in the quiet of the old house. At night, Nolan wrote in his journal, Day 143. Sarah, here now. Baby due soon. Earl warned me about appearances, about family finding out. Don't care. This is what the house is for. Shelter for people with nowhere else to go. She understands the mission. First person besides Margaret who has. She calls me sane. Funny how a stranger can see you more clearly than your own children. And then, late one evening, Sarah came downstairs holding her phone, face pale. He knows, she said. Jake knows where I am. He's coming. Jake arrived 2 days later, just after noon. Nolan was working on the upstairs landing when he heard the truck pull in. Loud engine, aggressive stop, gravel spraying. He looked out the window and saw a man in his 30s climb out, athletic build, wearing sunglasses and a tight black t-shirt despite the March chill. Nolan went downstairs. Sarah was in the kitchen and had heard it too, gone rigid with fear. Stay inside, Nolan said quietly. He'll be angry. Let him be angry. You're safe here. He stepped out onto the front porch as Jake came up the steps. The younger man moved with the coiled aggression of someone used to intimidating people with his presence. You Nolan? Jake asked, not waiting for an answer. Where is she? You need to leave. I need my girlfriend back. And my kid. Sarah doesn't want to see you. Jake pulled off his sunglasses. His eyes were cold and flat. I don't care what she wants. That's my child she's carrying. I have rights. You have the right to leave peacefully. That's about it. Old man, you don't want to do this. Jake stepped closer, using his height advantage. I don't know what she's told you, but Sarah's not stable. She ran off, left me without a word. I've been worried sick. Worried men don't make women run across the country. She's dramatic, likes to play the victim. I'm just trying to get her help." Nolan had heard this script before. From co-workers' stories at the plant, from neighbors' quiet confessions at church. The abuser's playbook: she's crazy, she's lying, I'm the real victim here. "She's not leaving," Nolan said. "And neither are you unless you walk back to your truck right now." Jake's jaw tightened. "You're harboring my girlfriend. That's kidnapping." "She's an adult making her own choices. Now you can leave or I can call the sheriff. Your choice." For a moment, Jake looked like he might try something physical. His hands flexed, his weight shifted forward. But then Sarah appeared in the doorway behind Nolan, and Jake's expression changed, went from anger to something like calculation. "Baby," he said, voice suddenly softer. "Come on, let's talk about this. I drove all this way just to see you." "I don't want to talk," Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm. "I told you it's over." "You don't mean that. You're just scared about the baby. I get it. But we can figure this out together. Come home with me." "No." "Sarah." I said no. She stepped out onto the porch and Nolan saw her hand trembling on the doorframe. "You hurt me, Jake. You scared me. I'm not coming back." Jake's face hardened again. "Fine. You want to play it this way? I'll get a lawyer. I'll file for custody. You think some judge is going to give you our kid when you're living with—" He gestured at Nolan. "This? A stranger old enough to be your grandfather. Nolan's helping me, which is more than you ever did. I'm the baby's father. I have rights." "You have nothing," Nolan said. "And if you don't leave right now, you'll have a restraining order too." Jake looked between them, measuring his options. Then he smiled, cold and mean. "Okay, sure, I'll leave. But this isn't over, not even close." He walked back to his truck, got in, revved the engine unnecessarily. Before he pulled out, he leaned out the window. "Sarah, when you come to your senses, you know my number. And old man, you're making a big mistake protecting her. She'll drag you down with her drama, but I guess you'll figure that out yourself." The truck kicked up gravel as it left, the sound of it fading slowly down the long driveway. Sarah was shaking. Nolan guided her back inside, sat her down at the kitchen table. "He meant it," she said, "about the lawyer, the custody fight. He has money, family connections. I have nothing. You have truth on your side. Truth doesn't always win." Her eyes were wet. "You don't know how this works. Men like Jake, they know how to make themselves look good. And someone like me, no family, no job, living with a stranger, any judge will question my stability. Then we document everything. We get ahead of it." "How?" Nolan was already thinking, his machinist's mind moving through the problem like a blueprint. "First, we file for a restraining order. Today, his showing up here uninvited gives us grounds. Second, you start seeing a doctor regularly. Get proper prenatal care. Build a record that you're responsible. Third," he paused. "Third, I show that this isn't just some random arrangement, that there's a plan here." "What kind of plan?" So he told her everything. The licensing process he'd started with the county, the paperwork filed for establishing a residential crisis center, the inspections passed, the permits approved, how he'd been building this house not just as a home but as a sanctuary, legal, registered, ready to help people exactly like her. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from fear to confusion to something like hope. "You mean this is official? Like a real shelter?" "Getting there. Still need final approval from county social services, but I've met all the preliminary requirements. Fire codes, safety standards, capacity limits, everything." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Didn't seem relevant, but now it is. If you're living in a licensed care facility rather than just some old man's house, that changes how a judge would see it. But it's not licensed yet." "Not yet, but it will be. I can accelerate the process." Over the next week, Nolan made calls he'd been putting off. County inspectors, social service liaisons, the housing authority administrator he'd been working with for months. He explained the situation. Not all of it, just enough. A pregnant woman in crisis, needing immediate shelter. Could they expedite the final approval? The inspections came. 3 different officials with clipboards and cameras, checking smoke detectors and electrical panels and emergency exits. They measured rooms, tested water quality, examined the documentation Nolan had meticulously maintained. The house passed every check. 10 days after Jake's visit, the letter arrived. Official county letterhead, formal language, Nolan's full name above Kessler House Residential Crisis Center. Approved for operation with a capacity of 4 residents. Licensed for 12 months pending renewal inspection. Sarah cried when he showed her. Real tears this time, relief and gratitude mixed together. "This means I can stay," she said. "Legally, as a resident of a care facility. This means you have a foundation to stand on when Jake tries his custody petition. Why are you doing this? Really?" Nolan looked at the approval letter, at the house that had consumed 5 months of his life, at the young woman who'd arrived twice asking for help he was finally able to give. "I made a promise to my wife," he said. "This is how I keep it." That night he wrote in his journal, day 156. House officially licensed. Sarah safe here now, legally protected. Jake threatened custody fight, but we have ground to stand on. First resident in Kessler House. Margaret would be proud. Kids still don't know any of this. Claire would probably say it proves I'm delusional. But I have the papers now. Official, legal, real, not delusion. Purpose. 2 days later, his phone rang. Claire's number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "I heard you're running some kind of shelter now, and that you have a pregnant girl living with you. We need to talk." "I'm listening. Not on the phone. I'm coming out there tomorrow, and this time, you're going to explain everything." She hung up before he could respond. Nolan sat on the finished porch swing, watching the sun set over the fields. Tomorrow his daughter would arrive. Tomorrow she'd see the house complete, the purpose fulfilled, the mission he'd been trying to tell her about for months. Tomorrow might change everything, or it might change nothing. Either way, the work was done. The promise was kept, and Sarah was safe. Claire arrived at 10 the next morning, punctual as always. But this time, Marcus came with her, and Nolan hadn't expected that. His son got out of the passenger seat slowly, looking around at the property like he was seeing it for the first time. In a way, he was. Neither of them had been here since the house was just a shell. Now it stood complete. Fresh paint, new roof, windows that caught the morning sun, the porch swing swaying gently in the spring breeze. It looked like a home again. "Dad," Claire said, her lawyer voice in place. "We need to talk." "Inside," Nolan said. "Coffee's on." He led them through the finished mudroom into the kitchen. He watched their faces as they took it in, the restored cabinets, the modern appliances, the table that had been their grandmother's. Margaret's recipe box sat on the counter, the painted roses visible. Claire's hand went to her throat. "Mom's box," she said quietly. "Found it in the pantry rubble. The cards are all still good." Marcus walked through slowly, touching the counter, looking out the window at the fields. "You did all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had help with electrical and plumbing permits." "It's—" Marcus stopped, started again. "It's really nice, Dad." Sarah appeared in the doorway, hesitant. She was in maternity jeans and one of Nolan's old flannel shirts, clearly pregnant, clearly young. Claire's expression went carefully neutral. "This is Sarah," Nolan said. "She's staying here temporarily." Sarah, these are my children, Claire and Marcus. I'll give you privacy, Sarah said, starting to retreat. No. Nolan's voice was firm. You're part of this conversation. Have a seat. They all sat at the grandmother's table, awkward, tense, waiting for someone to start. Finally, Claire opened her briefcase and pulled out papers. Earl Hanson from the hardware store called me, she said. Told me about Sarah, about the situation. Earl needs better hobbies. Dad, we're worried. You have a young, pregnant woman living with you. A stranger, someone who could be taking advantage. I'm not taking advantage, Sarah said quietly. I needed help. Nolan provided it. And what exactly is your story? Claire's courtroom voice, cross-examining. Where's the baby's father? Claire. Nolan started, but Sarah cut him off. His name is Jake. He's abusive. I left him. He tracked me down. Nolan's helping me stay safe. Do you have proof of abuse? Police reports, restraining orders? Not yet. We're working on it. Claire looked at Nolan. So you've taken in someone with no documentation, no verification, just her word that she needs help? Yes. Dad, do you understand how this looks? How vulnerable this makes you? I understand I'm helping someone who needs it. You're 72 years old, living alone with a young woman you barely know. If her ex-boyfriend shows up and there's violence, you could get hurt. If something happens to her or the baby, you could be liable. If she's lying about any of this, she's not lying. How do you know? Because I have eyes, Claire, and a brain that still works fine despite what you think. The words came out harder than he meant them to. Claire flinched and Marcus shifted uncomfortably. We don't think your brain doesn't work, Marcus said, always the peacemaker. We're just concerned about your judgment. This whole project, buying the house, rebuilding it alone, now taking in strangers, it's a lot for anyone, let alone someone your age. Someone my age, Nolan repeated. You mean old, declining, not to be trusted with his own decisions. That's not what we mean. Then what do you mean exactly? Claire pulled out another document. The letter they had sent months ago, the one about evaluation and facilities and cognitive decline. We mean this still stands. You haven't addressed any of our concerns. If anything, this situation with Sarah makes them worse. Nolan stood up, walked to the counter and opened a drawer. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents, and dropped it on the table in front of Claire. Read that, he said. Claire opened the envelope. Marcus leaned over to look. Nolan watched their faces as they read through the papers. Permits, inspection reports, licensing agreements, official county documents with seals and signatures. The Kessler House Residential Crisis Center approval letter on top. What is this? Claire asked, but her voice had changed, uncertain now. It's what I've been trying to tell you for 6 months. I'm not just rebuilding a house. I'm creating a licensed shelter for people in crisis, adults who need temporary safe housing. Sarah's not some stranger I took in. She's the first official resident of a county-approved care facility. Marcus was reading carefully, flipping through pages. These dates? Dad, some of these applications are from before Mom died. We started planning it together. Your mother and I. It was her idea as much as mine. Why didn't you tell us? Claire's lawyer mask was cracking. Why all the secrecy? I tried. You wouldn't listen. Every time I started to explain, you interrupted with concerns about my mental state. You'd already decided I was falling apart. Because you sold everything, moved into a construction site, as part of a plan. A detailed, legally sound, county-approved plan. But you couldn't see past your own assumptions. Sarah was watching this unfold, staying quiet. Marcus kept reading the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to something else. Understanding, maybe, or shame. There's more, Nolan said. He went to his room and came back with his work journal, opened it to the first page, dated the week after Margaret's funeral. "I've documented everything, every decision, every expense, every step of the approval process. The why behind all of it." He turned to a page from early in the process and read aloud. "Margaret and I talked about this for the last 6 months of her life. She wanted our grief over Emily to become something good, a place where people who'd been broken by life could find shelter, where family meant more than blood, where the love we couldn't give our 4th child could help others." Claire's face went white. "Emily, Dad, Emily died 42 years ago. And we never talked about her. Not properly. Not with you kids. Barely with each other. We just buried that grief and kept going. But it never went away, Claire. It's been sitting in our chests for 42 years. Your mother understood that. She asked me to transform it. Into this, a shelter, into purpose, into something that might save lives instead of just haunting ours." Marcus had tears in his eyes. "We didn't know. About Emily, I mean. Not really. You never talked about her. We thought we were protecting you. Turns out we were just hiding." Claire was still holding the licensing documents, reading them more carefully now. Dad, this is actually impressive. The permit process alone must have taken months. 8 months total. Started applications before Margaret died. She helped me research requirements, write proposals. After she passed, I kept going because I'd promised her. And we thought you were losing your mind," Marcus said quietly. "Can you blame us?" Claire's voice was defensive but softer. "You disappeared into this project, stopped communicating, sold everything, lived in what looked like terrible conditions. From the outside, it looked like grief-driven delusion. From the inside, it was keeping a promise." Sarah spoke up for the first time in several minutes. "Your father saved my life. Maybe literally. When I showed up here the first time, I was running with nowhere to go. He helped me without question. When I came back pregnant and desperate, he took me in. And when my ex showed up threatening me, Nolan protected me and gave me legal standing to fight for my baby. He's not delusional. He's the sanest, kindest person I've ever met." Claire looked at Sarah. Really looked at her this time. "How far along are you?" 36 weeks. "And you're getting prenatal care?" "Nolan takes me to the clinic weekly. I have a delivery plan, a pediatrician lined up. Everything documented for when Jake files his custody petition." "He's filing for custody?" "Probably. He threatened it. But now I'm a resident of a licensed care facility with medical records showing responsible prenatal care. Better position than I'd have on my own." Marcus was still reading the journal. "Dad, there's so much in here. Your whole thought process, all your planning. Why didn't you just show us this months ago?" "I tried. You wouldn't look. You'd already decided what this was." "We were wrong," Marcus said simply. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying the licensing papers. Then she looked at her father. "This letter we sent you, about evaluation and cognitive decline. I'm withdrawing it. Formally. You clearly don't need evaluation. If anything, you've been thinking more clearly than we have. Thank you." "But Dad," she set the papers down, "you should have made us listen. Should have forced us to understand." "How?" "By dragging you here against your will, by sending you documents you dismiss as rationalization." "By not giving up on us," Claire said, and her voice broke. "We gave up on you so easily. Decided you were falling apart and stopped listening. That's on us. But you just let us walk away. Didn't fight for us to understand." "I was tired of fighting. Tired of defending myself to my own children." "So you wrote us off?" "I kept living my life. There's a difference." The kitchen was quiet except for the tick of the old wall clock Nolan had restored. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I want to help," he said. "With the house, the shelter, whatever you need. I'm an engineer. I can help with systems, maintenance planning. I want to be part of this." "Me too," Claire said. "I can help with legal structure, liability protection. You'll need proper insurance, formal intake protocols. Let me help." Nolan looked at his children, saw them really seeing him for the first time in months, saw the moment they stepped back from their assumptions and met him where he actually was. "Beth should be here for this too," he said. "I'll call her," Claire said. "We'll all come back, as a family, and this time we'll listen." After they left, Sarah found Nolan sitting on the porch swing, looking out at the fields. "That went better than I expected," she said. "They understand now. Doesn't erase the months they didn't. But it's a start." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, when the baby comes, you'll need more support than I can give alone. Would you be okay with my kids being involved? Helping out?" "I'd like that. Baby needs family, even if it's borrowed family." Nolan smiled at that. Borrowed family. Maybe that's what this whole place was for. Building family for people who'd lost theirs or never had it. Creating connection where blood had failed. The evening sun was golden across the fields. Inside, dinner was warming in the oven, one of Margaret's recipes that Sarah had helped him make. The house smelled like home. Borrowed family, he thought. Or maybe just the real kind. The kind you chose and built and kept choosing every day. Maybe there was no difference. Jake's custody petition arrived 1 week later, delivered by a process server who handed Sarah the papers with practiced indifference. She read them standing in the kitchen, her face going pale, then handed them to Nolan without a word. The language was clinical and brutal. Jake Thornton, petitioner, seeking full custody of unborn child due to mother's unstable living situation and mental health concerns. Evidence attached. Statements from Sarah's cousin in Oregon about erratic behavior, documentation of Sarah's lack of employment, questions about her judgment in living with an elderly stranger. The petition painted her as irresponsible, possibly mentally ill, certainly unfit to raise a child alone. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "He knows how to make himself look good and me look crazy." Claire came out the next day and read through the petition with her lawyer's eyes. She sat at the kitchen table making notes, her expression getting grimmer with each page. "It's not as strong as he thinks," she said finally. "But it's not nothing either. He has resources, clearly hired a good attorney. And some of this—" She tapped the section about Sarah living with Nolan. "Could play badly with the wrong judge." "Even though it's a licensed facility?" Nolan asked. "The license helps. But Jake's lawyer is framing it as you taking advantage of a vulnerable young woman, playing on stereotypes about older men and younger women. That's ridiculous." "Ridiculous doesn't mean it won't work." Claire looked at Sarah. "We need to build a counter-narrative. Document everything. Show you're responsible, stable, making good choices for your baby." "How?" "Medical records showing consistent care, character witnesses, evidence of Jake's abuse. Do you have anything? Text messages, photos, witnesses to incidents?" Sarah pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly. "Some texts, from when he'd apologize after the bad nights. And there's a neighbor in Pennsylvania who saw bruises, called the cops once, but I was too scared to press charges." "Get me that neighbor's contact info. Those texts too. We'll build a timeline." Claire was in full lawyer mode now, decisive and efficient. "And I'm representing you, pro bono, family discount." "I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. You're part of this family now, whether you planned it or not." The words hung in the air. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Over the next week, the house transformed into something like a war room. Claire came out twice more, bringing files and documents, helping Sarah prepare her side of the story. Marcus drove out and installed a better security system. Cameras at the driveway entrance, motion sensors, upgraded locks. Not because they expected trouble, he said, but because documentation of safety precautions would help in court. Beth called for the first time since the family rupture, her voice tentative on the phone. "Dad? Claire told me everything. About the shelter, about Sarah. I'm sorry I wasn't there. You're here now. Can I come visit? I'd like to meet Sarah, see what you've built." She arrived on a Saturday, bringing her husband Dave and their 2 kids, Nolan's grandchildren, 8 and 10, who he hadn't seen in almost a year. The kids ran through the house exploring while Beth stood in the kitchen and cried. "I can't believe we didn't see it," she said. "What you were doing. Mom would be so proud. Your mother was proud before she died. She helped plan all of this." We never let her talk about it either, did we? At the end, when she wanted to discuss the house, the plans, we changed the subject because we thought it was just grief talking. You were protecting yourselves. I understand that. But we should have listened. Beth wiped her eyes. "Sarah, I know we just met, but if you need anything, babysitting after the baby comes, someone to talk to, whatever, I'm here." Sarah managed a smile despite her own tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The hearing date was set for 3 weeks out. Jake had filed for emergency temporary custody, citing the baby's imminent arrival and concerns about Sarah's stability. Claire fought it, got it moved to standard family court proceedings, but the timeline was tight. The baby was due in 2 weeks. Everything would come down to who told the more convincing story. Sarah went into nesting mode, preparing the nursery that Nolan had already mostly finished. They painted together, soft yellow walls, white trim, cloud stencils that Beth helped with. Marcus installed a baby monitor system. Claire brought a crib that her kids had used, still in good condition. The family rallied around this young woman they barely knew, building something that looked increasingly like real support. Reverend Walsh visited, bringing a casserole and a character reference letter he'd written without being asked. "For the court," he said, "testifying to your sound judgment and Sarah's responsible choices." Earl from the hardware store showed up with a truck full of supplies, diapers, wipes, baby clothes. "From folks in town," he said gruffly. "Word got around about what you're doing here. People wanted to help." "You told people?" Nolan asked. "Didn't have to. Small town. People talk. But they're talking good things now. About how you're helping this young woman, how you built something that matters." Even the county inspector, who'd approved the facility license, called to offer testimony if needed. "Kessler House is solid," she said. "Best residential crisis setup I've seen in this county. You should be proud." But as the support grew, so did the tension. Sarah couldn't sleep, worried about the hearing, about Jake's resources and charisma. She'd wake at 3 in the morning and Nolan would hear her pacing upstairs, trying to calm her fears and the baby both. One night, he found her sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the dark fields. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "What if I lose? What if the judge believes Jake's version? Then we appeal. We keep fighting." You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, but it's necessary. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Why are you doing this? Really? You could have just let me stay here, been a landlord or whatever. You didn't have to get involved in the custody fight, bring your whole family in, put yourself at risk." Nolan sat beside her on the swing, set it moving gently. "I told you about Emily, my daughter who died. Your 4th child. The one your living kids don't remember. After she died, Margaret and we should have grieved properly. Should have talked about it, processed it, let ourselves feel it fully. But we didn't. We buried it deep and got on with life because that's what you did back then. And that buried grief, it changed our family in ways we didn't recognize until it was too late. How? Made us careful. Made us hold back from full joy because we were always afraid of full loss. Made us teach our kids to be careful too, to protect themselves, to keep their hearts at a safe distance. And now, look at them. Claire, who can't stop trying to control everything. Marcus, who struggles to communicate feelings. Beth, who defers to others instead of trusting herself. They learned emotional caution from parents who were terrified of being hurt again. You can't blame yourself for that. I don't, but I recognize it. And when Margaret asked me to do something good with the sadness, I understood what she meant. Don't let Emily's death teach only fear. Let it teach compassion. Let it create space for the kind of messy, risky, vulnerable love that we couldn't quite manage after we lost her. So this house is where I practice a different way, where I say yes to people who need help, even if it's complicated, where I risk my heart and my comfort because that's what love requires. It's what I should have modeled for my kids all along. Sarah wiped her eyes. That's a lot to carry. It's a lot to carry alone. But with family, real family, chosen family, borrowed family, it gets lighter. The next morning, Sarah went into labor. It was 2 weeks early, but the doctor said that was fine, normal range. Claire drove them to the hospital, called Marcus and Beth, coordinated everything with the calm efficiency of someone used to crisis management. Beth arrived with her kids and stayed with them in the waiting room. Marcus came straight from work, still in his engineer's coveralls. The family that had been fractured 6 months ago, gathered in a hospital waiting room, united around a young woman they'd known for weeks and the baby she was about to bring into a complicated world. Jake showed up 4 hours into the labor. He'd gotten word somehow, arrived wearing a suit, looking every inch the concerned father. He tried to get into the delivery room, was denied by hospital security at Sarah's request. He stood in the hallway and glared at the Kessler family. All of them ranged like a wall between him and the woman he claimed to love. "This isn't over," he said to Nolan. "Court's in 3 days. You think playing house with her makes you her savior. You're just an old man who doesn't know when to mind his own business." "My business is helping people who need it," Nolan said calmly. "That makes Sarah my business. We'll see what the judge says about that." Jake left, and they waited. The evening stretched into night. Beth's kids fell asleep in waiting room chairs. Marcus brought coffee from the vending machine. Claire worked on her laptop, preparing for the hearing, building their case even as they waited for the baby. At 11:30, a nurse came out smiling. "Sarah's asking for Nolan." He went in, and Sarah was there in the bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny girl wrapped in a hospital blanket. The baby had dark hair and Sarah's nose and a face so new it looked unfinished, still becoming itself. "Meet Margaret," Sarah said. "If that's okay, I wanted to name her after the woman who started all this." Nolan couldn't speak. He just nodded, and Sarah placed the baby in his arms. She was so light, so fragile, so absolutely alive. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "for everything. For seeing me. For fighting for me. For showing me what family can be." Out in the waiting room, Nolan brought the baby to his children. They gathered around, this tiny girl named after their mother, and something in all of them softened. Beth cried. Marcus touched the baby's hand with one careful finger. Claire, who controlled everything, let herself feel the moment without managing it. "Mom would love this," Beth said. "Would love that her name got to start over with someone so new." 3 days, Nolan thought. 3 days until the hearing that would determine this baby's future. 3 days to make sure Jake's money and lawyers didn't win over truth and love and the family they'd built in this old farmhouse. 3 days to prove that borrowed family was real family. That promises kept were worth the cost. That an old man's dream could stand up in court. The courtroom was smaller than Nolan expected. Family court, Claire explained, was different from criminal proceedings. Less formal, but no less consequential. The judge was a woman in her 50s, grey hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the files before her. Jake sat with his lawyer at one table, looking polished and concerned in his dark suit. Sarah sat with Claire at the other, baby Margaret with Beth in the gallery. Nolan sat behind them, Marcus beside him, their presence a quiet wall of support. Judge Patricia Coleman looked up from the documents. "This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child, Margaret Dawson, born 3 days ago, to Sarah Dawson. Mr. Thornton is petitioning for primary custody. Ms. Dawson is opposing. Let's begin." Jake's lawyer stood. His name was Robert Carson, silver-haired and expensive-looking. "Your Honor, my client is seeking custody because he has serious concerns about the child's welfare. Ms. Dawson has demonstrated a pattern of instability, leaving the state without notification, living in questionable circumstances, making impulsive decisions that put herself and the baby at risk." He laid out their case with professional precision. Sarah's sudden departure from Pennsylvania. Her brief time in Oregon that ended in conflict with family. Her current situation living in what he called an unlicensed boarding house run by an elderly man with no professional qualifications. Mr. Thornton has stable employment, family support, and a home prepared for the child. Carson continued. He wants to be a father. Ms. Dawson has prevented that through her erratic choices. When he finished, Judge Coleman looked at Claire. "Ms. Kessler." Claire stood, and Nolan recognized her courtroom presence. Calm, authoritative, every word chosen with care. "Your Honor, Mr. Carson's characterization bears little resemblance to reality. The truth is straightforward. Sarah Dawson left an abusive relationship to protect herself and her unborn child. She sought help from family who ultimately rejected her. And she found safety at Kessler House, a licensed residential crisis facility operated by my father. She presented the licensing documents, the county approval, the inspection reports. Judge Coleman examined them carefully. "Kessler House is fully licensed?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. For crisis residential services, Ms. Dawson is an official resident, receiving appropriate support and care." Carson stood. "Your Honor, the licensing is recent, suspiciously convenient given the timing of this custody petition, and the facility is run by Ms. Kessler's 72-year-old father, a man with no professional training in social services. My father has 35 years of professional experience, meticulous attention to detail, and a clear mission," Claire responded. "The licensing process took 8 months and required meeting extensive county requirements. Nothing suspicious about it, just thorough planning." Judge Coleman made a note. "I'll hear from Mr. Thornton first. Mr. Thornton, take the stand." Jake walked to the witness stand with confidence. Under Carson's questioning, he painted himself as the concerned father, devastated when Sarah left, worried about her mental state, wanting only what's best for his daughter. "I love Sarah," he said, looking directly at the judge. "I was ready to be a family, but she ran away while I was at work, didn't tell me she was leaving. I've been searching for her for months, terrified something would happen to her or the baby." When Claire cross-examined, her voice was measured. "Mr. Thornton, why do you think Sarah left?" "I don't know. We had some disagreements, but nothing that warranted disagreements." Claire pulled out a document. "Is this a police report from a domestic disturbance call at your residence last August?" Jake's jaw tightened. That was a misunderstanding. A neighbor overreacted. "The report indicates officers observed Ms. Dawson with visible bruising. She bruises easily. Did you ever push Ms. Dawson?" "No." "Did you ever raise your hand to her in anger?" "We argued. Couples argue." That's not what I asked. The questions continued, each one chipping away at Jake's polished exterior. Claire presented the threatening texts he'd sent when he found Sarah in Oregon. The angry voicemail after she refused to see him at the farmhouse. The custody petition filed within days of finding her, weaponizing her vulnerability. By the time Jake left the stand, his careful image had cracked. He looked angry now, defensive. Exactly what Claire wanted the judge to see. Judge Coleman called a brief recess. In the hallway, Sarah held baby Margaret and tried to stay calm. "How's it going?" she asked Claire. Better than his side expected. "But we need your testimony to seal it." When they reconvened, Sarah took the stand. She looked young and scared, but determined. Claire walked her through the story. The relationship that started sweet and turned sour, the escalating control and anger, the shove that made her fear for her baby's life. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Claire asked. "I was scared. He has money, connections. I thought no one would believe me." "Why did you go back to Kessler House instead of staying in Oregon?" "Because Nolan had helped me before. And because when Jake found me in Oregon, my cousin chose protecting herself over protecting me. I needed somewhere safe. Nolan offered that without conditions." "Tell the judge about living at Kessler House." Sarah's voice steadied. "It's the first place I've felt safe in years. Nolan doesn't just provide a room. He provides dignity. He treats me like family. His children have rallied around me and Margaret. For the first time in my life, I understand what family is supposed to be." Carson tried to discredit her on cross-examination, suggesting she was manipulating an elderly man, playing the victim to get free housing. But Sarah held firm, answering each question honestly, never defensive, just truthful. Judge Coleman listened carefully, making notes, her expression unreadable. When Sarah stepped down, the judge looked at both lawyers. "I'm ready to hear closing statements." Carson stood for his closing argument, straightening his expensive suit. "Your Honor, at its core, this case is about what's best for the child. Mr. Thornton offers stability, employment, resources, a traditional home environment. Ms. Dawson offers uncertainty. She's financially dependent, living in a facility she can't afford to leave, supported by charity. That's not a foundation for raising a child." He sat down, confident in his summary. Claire rose, and Nolan saw his daughter fully in her element. "Your Honor, Mr. Carson wants you to believe that money and traditional structures equal good parenting, but this court knows better. This court knows that what a child needs most is safety, love, and a parent who will protect them above all else. Sarah Dawson has demonstrated all three." She paused, letting the words land. When Miss Dawson was being abused, she made the hardest choice a person can make. She left. With no resources, no support system, she left to protect her unborn child. That's not instability. That's courage. Claire walked slowly, commanding the space. When her family in Oregon rejected her, she didn't give up. She returned to the one place where someone had shown her genuine kindness. That's not impulsive. That's smart survival. And when Mr. Thornton tracked her down and threatened her safety, she didn't fold. She sought legal help, built documentation, prepared to fight for her daughter. That's not weakness. That's strength. She turned to face the judge directly. "Your Honor, I'd like to call one more witness, Nolan Kessler." Carson stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Kessler isn't on the witness list." "I'm allowing it," Judge Coleman said. "Mr. Kessler, take the stand." Nolan walked forward, feeling his age in his joints, but not in his conviction. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the chair still warm from Sarah's testimony. Claire approached him gently. "Mr. Kessler, why did you create Kessler House?" "To keep a promise to my wife. She died 3 years ago, and before she passed, she asked me to do something good with our grief. We'd lost a daughter 42 years earlier, Emily, who lived only 3 days. That loss shaped our whole family, taught us to be careful with our hearts. Margaret wanted to transform that old sadness into something that could help others. And how does helping Sarah fulfill that promise? Sarah arrived at my door asking for help. I gave it because that's what the house was built for. To be a place where people who've been rejected or hurt can find safety. It's not about me being a hero. It's about creating space where family can be chosen instead of just inherited. Carson stood for cross-examination, his tone sharp. Mr. Kessler, you're 72 years old. Are you qualified to care for a newborn infant? I raised 3 children of my own. 50 years ago, things have changed. Are you physically capable of the demands of infant care? I'm not caring for the infant alone. Sarah is Margaret's mother. I'm providing support and a safe environment. You have no professional training in social work or child development. I have a lifetime of experience in building things that last and helping people who need it. Sometimes that matters more than credentials. Carson paused, then pulled out a document. Mr. Kessler, isn't it true that your own children thought you were mentally declining? That they sent you a letter suggesting you needed evaluation? The courtroom went quiet. Nolan saw Claire tense, saw Sarah's expression falter. They did, Nolan said calmly. Because they didn't understand what I was building. They assumed my grief had broken me. But they were wrong. Were they? Or did you simply convince them otherwise after the fact? Your Honor, Claire objected, this is argumentative and irrelevant. I'll allow it, the judge said. Mr. Kessler, answer the question. Nolan looked at Jake, then at the judge, then at his own children sitting in the gallery. Claire, who doubted him. Marcus, who'd stayed silent. Beth, who'd waited too long to reach out. And then at Sarah, holding baby Margaret, both of them depending on his words right now. My children were scared, he said. They'd lost their mother and thought they were losing me too. They looked at my choices and saw decline because they couldn't imagine another explanation. But they were seeing what they feared, not what was real. And when they finally listened, when they looked at the documentation, the planning, the actual work, they understood. The letter they sent was based on assumptions. What they know now is based on evidence. He paused. I'm not perfect. I'm old and stubborn, and I don't always communicate well. But I'm not declining. I'm building, and Sarah and Margaret are part of what I'm building. Judge Coleman leaned forward. Mr. Kessler, let me ask you directly. Do you believe Ms. Dawson is a fit mother? I believe she's exactly the kind of mother every child deserves. She's fierce and protective and willing to sacrifice everything for her daughter's safety. Yes, Your Honor, she's fit. And you're prepared to continue supporting her? For as long as she needs it, and not just me, my whole family is prepared to support her. Thank you, Mr. Kessler. You may step down. Nolan returned to his seat. Claire gave closing arguments, emphasizing the strength of Sarah's support system, the legitimacy of Kessler House, the documented evidence of Jake's controlling behavior. Carson gave his rebuttal, but it felt weaker now. The narrative had shifted. Judge Coleman removed her glasses. I'm prepared to rule. This is a challenging case because both parents clearly want what they believe is best for the child. However, the evidence is clear on several points. The courtroom held its breath. First, Ms. Dawson's departure from Pennsylvania was justified given the documented pattern of concerning behavior by Mr. Thornton. Second, her current living situation at a licensed residential facility is appropriate and stable. Third, and most importantly, the support system surrounding Ms. Dawson, including Mr. Kessler and his family, demonstrates a commitment to this child's welfare that extends beyond traditional definitions of family. Judge Coleman looked at Jake. Mr. Thornton, you will have supervised visitation rights, subject to completion of anger management counseling. Primary custody is awarded to Ms. Dawson. Sarah gasped, clutching baby Margaret. Claire grabbed her hand. In the gallery, Beth started crying. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding. Nolan just closed his eyes and felt the weight lift. They'd won. Family, borrowed, chosen, built from scratch, had won. 3 months after the hearing, Nolan stood on the front porch of Kessler House and watched the sun set over the fields. The house was alive with sound now. Baby Margaret crying upstairs, Sarah singing softly to soothe her, Claire in the kitchen on a work call, Marcus and Beth's kids running through the yard shrieking with the particular joy of summer evenings. The sign Marcus had made hung by the front door. Kessler House, family begins here. Hand-carved wood, letters painted white, simple and true. 2 new residents had moved in last month. David, a 67-year-old veteran who'd lost his housing when his disability benefits got tangled in bureaucracy. And Michael, 22, aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. The house that had once stood empty and dying now held 6 people building their lives back from the broken places they'd started. Beth appeared beside him, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "Mom's recipe," she said, handing him one. Sarah found it in the box. They'd been using Margaret's recipe box weekly now. Sunday cinnamon rolls, Wednesday pot roast, Friday apple pie. Each dish a small resurrection of the woman who'd blessed this project before she died. "The county inspector called," Beth said. "They want to feature Kessler House in their annual report. Apparently you've set a new standard for crisis residential facilities." "Your mother set the standard. I just built what she imagined." "You both did." Beth sipped her lemonade. "I've been thinking a lot about Emily lately. Our sister, the one we never knew." "Yeah? I wish you'd told us about her. Really told us, not just mentioned it once when we were too young to understand. We thought we were protecting you." "I know, but Dad..." She turned to face him. "All those years you and Mom were holding back, being careful with your hearts, it taught us to do the same. Claire controls everything because she's terrified of losing control. Marcus can't express emotions because he never saw you express them. And me, I spent my whole life trying to keep everyone happy because I was scared of conflict. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just learn from it with the people in this house now. Let them see the messy, complicated, vulnerable parts. That's what real family is." Inside, the timer went off. Dinner was ready, a potluck-style meal where everyone contributed. David had made his mother's cornbread. Michael brought salad from the garden he'd planted in May. Sarah roasted chicken with herbs. The Kessler children brought side dishes and dessert. They gathered around the extended table, the one that used to seat 4 and now squeezed in 10. Nolan sat at the head with baby Margaret in a bassinet beside him, and he looked at the faces around the table. His blood family, yes, but also the family he'd chosen and who'd chosen him back. Marcus raised his glass. "A toast to Dad, who showed us that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up when you need them." "To Kessler House," Claire added. "May it always be a place where family begins." They drank, and then the meal started. Passing dishes, telling stories, Michael making the kids laugh with terrible jokes, David sharing Navy stories that Beth's husband hung on every word of. The noise was beautiful, chaotic and warm and alive. After dinner, while the others cleaned up, Nolan took Margaret out to the porch swing. The baby was 3 months old now, alert and curious, watching the fireflies starting to appear in the twilight. "Your name came from a good woman," Nolan told her quietly. "She believed in second chances and borrowed families and transforming grief into love. You carry that forward now." Sarah joined them, sitting on the swing. "She's lucky to have you as a grandfather figure." "Not a figure, just a grandfather, if that's okay." "More than okay." Sarah smiled. "Grandpa Nolan. I like the sound of that." Claire came out with her phone. Beth wants a family photo, everyone together. They gathered on the porch, 3 generations of Kesslers plus the family they'd built around them. David and Michael, who'd found shelter here. Sarah and Margaret, who'd found safety. Even Earl from the hardware store showed up, part of the extended network that had grown around the house. The camera clicked, the moment preserved. Later, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Nolan sat alone on the swing and opened his work journal. The pages were almost full now, months of entries documenting the journey from broken house to living home. Day 267. House is full tonight. 3 residents, plus Sarah and Margaret. Family everywhere. Blood and chosen both. Made pot roast from Margaret's recipe. Tasted like memory and hope mixed together. County wants to showcase us as model facility. Claire handling legal aspects of expansion. We might add beds, help more people. Marcus redesigning systems for larger capacity. Beth volunteering 3 days a week teaching life skills. We're becoming something bigger than I imagined. Margaret would be proud. Emily's brief life has touched people she never met, created safety for people born decades after she died. The promise is kept, the grief transformed, the house alive again. He closed the journal and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, maybe, Margaret was watching. Emily, too, proud of what their loves and losses had built. The screen door creaked and Sarah appeared with Margaret. She won't settle. Mind if we sit with you? Never. They sat together on the swing, 3 generations rocking gently in the summer darkness. The house glowed behind them, every window lit, every room occupied, every space filled with the sound of people who'd found their way home. Nolan thought about the day Claire had called him crazy, the months of loneliness and doubt, the moment Sarah had first appeared asking for help. All of it leading here, to this porch, this night, this borrowed family that had become more real than any blood tie. His children had called him crazy. They'd been wrong. But their wrongness had led to understanding, and their understanding had led to this. A house that saved not just Sarah and Margaret, but David and Michael and eventually dozens more. Sometimes being called crazy just meant you could see a truth that others couldn't yet. Sometimes spending your last dollar bought you more than anyone imagined. Sometimes a promise made to a dying wife became a legacy that outlived both of you. Baby Margaret fell asleep against Sarah's chest. The fireflies danced in the fields. Inside, someone laughed. David or Michael or one of the grandkids. The sound of family. The sound of home. The sound of love that refused to be confined by blood or convention or anyone's expectations. Nolan closed his eyes and let the peace of it wash over him. He'd built what Margaret asked for. He'd transformed the grief. He'd kept the promise. And in the keeping, he'd found himself again, not broken by loss, but remade by love. The swing creaked gently. The night air was sweet with summer. In his arms, metaphorically at least, he held everything that mattered, past and future, grief and hope, promises kept and new lives beginning. This was what family looked like when you built it from scratch. This was what came from refusing to give up on love. This was home.